My hands were shaking so badly I couldn't get the string off the box. For years since I buried Margaret, and now a courier was standing on my porch in the rain, holding out a package with her handwriting on the label. Her handwriting. Blue ink. That little loop she always put on the capital G. Inside, wrapped in tissue paper gone soft with age, was a cassette tape and a note. Go to our old cafe. Don't tell our daughter. Not yet, Frank. Please. I stood there in the doorway with the rain coming sideways onto my slippers, and all I could think was, Margaret didn't leave notes. Margaret left instructions. And instructions meant she'd known something was coming. Something she never got the chance to finish. My name is Frank Delacroix. I'm 67 years old, and for 31 years I ran a mid-sized commercial printing company out of Toledo, Ohio, Delacroix Print and Bind. I started it with an $8,000 loan from my father-in-law and a used offset press that jammed if you looked at it wrong. By the time I sold my majority stake 4 years ago, the company was worth $6.2 million. I sold it for one reason. Margaret was dying, and I wanted every remaining day with her, not with a printing press. She passed 11 weeks after the sale closed. Pancreatic cancer. Fast, cruel, over before I'd finished grieving the diagnosis. We had one daughter, Eleanor, 34 years old, married to a man named Trent Bishop, 36, who described himself, without irony, as a wealth strategist. I had put $1.4 million into a trust for Elle, administered jointly by me and, after some persuading from Trent, by Trent himself. To ease your burden, Frank, you've been through enough. I didn't know, when I signed those papers 18 months ago, that I was handing a wolf the keys to the henhouse. I didn't know that box on my porch would end up proving it. 3 weeks before the package arrived, I'd shown up unannounced at Elle and Trent's house for her birthday. I brought a bottle of the Bordeaux Margaret and I used to split on our anniversary. I'd been saving the last 2 bottles from our cellar for a moment that felt right. Nobody answered the door, so I let myself around back, the way I always had. Through the kitchen window I saw them before they saw me. Trent was in a linen shirt I recognized from a boutique that didn't sell anything under $400, pouring champagne. Real champagne. The good stuff. Not what I'd have picked for a Tuesday, for 2 men in suits I didn't recognize. Elle was laughing at something, wearing a bracelet I'd never seen, gold with a sapphire clasp. To liquidity, Trent said, raising his glass, and the 2 suits laughed like it was the funniest thing they'd heard all year. I stood in the yard holding a 14-year-old bottle of wine like an idiot, and something in my chest went cold and very, very quiet. I didn't go in. I put the bottle on the back step, and I drove home. I called the trust's bank the next morning, told them I was a co-trustee, which I was, and asked for a current statement. It took 4 days and 1 notarized request, but it came. The trust that should have held $1.4 million, minus normal growth and Elle's modest monthly distributions, showed a balance of $340,000. I called Trent. He answered on the second ring, breezy as ever. Frank, everything okay? The trust is short over $1 million, Trent. Oh, right? Yeah, I should have looped you in. We moved a chunk into a private placement, a pre-IPO logistics fund, incredible ground floor opportunity, illiquid for now, but the multiple on exit is projected at 4x. It's just parked, Frank, not gone. Illiquidity isn't loss. Anyone in wealth management will tell you that. I said, send me the fund documents. Absolutely. I'll have my analyst pull the PPM together. He never sent it. 2 weeks later, I drove to the address on the one piece of letterhead Trent had emailed me, Meridian Bishop Capital Partners, a suite number in a downtown office tower. The suite was a shared co-working space. The woman at the front desk had never heard of Meridian Bishop. We get a lot of people renting just the mailing address, she said, not unkindly. It's $89 a month. Real popular with this kind of thing. I went back to Elle and Trent's a second time, quieter this time. No wine, no announcement. I parked down the block and walked up as Trent was on his phone in the driveway, pacing. No, the old man's harmless. He barely reads his own statements. Elle handles all that, and Elle does whatever I tell her, so relax. By the time he figures out the funds a shell, it'll be in the Caymans, and so will we. I stood behind the hedge until my knees ached, and I wrote down, word for word, everything I heard, on the back of a gas receipt. I confronted Trent directly at a family dinner, calm, asking him to walk me through the fund's custodian and administrator, using the exact language his own PPM would need to have. He blinked twice too many times and said, "Frank, honestly, the fact you're asking about custodians tells me you've been talking to someone trying to scare you. Dad-in-law energy, I get it, but this is sophisticated finance. There's a lockup period, there's a waterfall structure, look, I'll get you the K1 at tax time and it'll all make sense." I said, "Of course, makes sense." And I smiled, and I ate my chicken, and inside I was already calling a forensic accountant I'd used once, decades ago, during an ugly vendor dispute at the print shop. The forensic accountant, a sharp woman named Priya Anand, took 11 days. Her findings: there was no fund. There was no PPM, no custodian, no K1 filed anywhere with the IRS under that EIN. The money, $1.06 million, had moved through 3 shell LLCs Trent controlled, then into a joint account with L's name on it that L, when Priya discreetly checked county records, appeared to have no knowledge existed. Trent had forged a signature, L's signature, to open it. He wasn't just stealing from me. He was stealing from L and setting her up to take the fall for it. That was the night the tape from Margaret's package finally made sense to me. Because when I played it, 3 days after that porch delivery, alone in my car in the parking lot of Our Old Café, the Bluebird, the one where Margaret and I had our first date in 1981, her voice came through the static and said, "Frank, if you're hearing this, it means I couldn't warn you myself in time. I found something in Trent's old business partner's lawsuit files, back when we were vetting him before the wedding. I never told you because I didn't want to ruin L's happiness over a hunch. But keep this tape. And Frank, trust the numbers, not the smile." Margaret had known. For years before I did, she'd known, and she'd left me a breadcrumb instead of an accusation, because she loved our daughter too much to blow up her wedding over a hunch that might have been wrong. It wasn't wrong. I made a decision in that parking lot. Engine still running, tape still in my hand. I was not going to come at Trent Bishop like a man with a forensic accountant and a recording. I was going to come at him like exactly what he already believed me to be, a grieving, aging widower who signed things he didn't read. I started small. I began calling Elle sweetheart too often and forgetting the names of her friends I'd known for years. I let my voice shake on the phone, even when it didn't need to. I showed up to the next family dinner in a cardigan Margaret had knitted me, using my late father's old cane, not because I needed it, but because a man leaning on a cane doesn't look like a man building a case. "Trent, I don't understand all this fund business," I said, patting his arm. "You know I'm no good with numbers past a balance sheet. I trust you. Margaret always said you had a good head for this." I watched something in his shoulders relax. He believed me. He'd needed to believe me. A scared old man asking no more questions was the outcome he wanted, and I gave it to him, deliberately, the way you give a dog a treat to get it to sit still for the leash. Inside, I was doing the opposite of relaxing. Every "I don't understand" was a stall. Every trembling hand was theater. Margaret used to say I had the best poker face of anyone who never played poker. I was about to find out if she was right. I set 3 things in motion. First, I asked Priya to prepare a clean, simple, 1-page summary of the Shell LLC trail and the forged signature, something a judge could read in 90 seconds, and I had it delivered quietly to L's personal email, the one Trent didn't manage, with a note, "Read this alone. Don't confront him yet. I love you, Dad." Second, I contacted a detective at the Toledo PD's Financial Crimes Unit, a retired colleague of a man I used to golf with, and laid out everything Priya had found. He confirmed forged signatures on a joint account were enough for a warrant, especially paired with the wire trail. He asked me to get Trent talking, on record, about the fund one more time, something specific enough to close the loop. Third, I planned a dinner. Elle's upcoming milestone, her 35th birthday, was the perfect stage. I told Trent I wanted to make a toast to celebrate the fund doing so well, and asked him, all trembling gratitude, if he'd explain it to everyone the way you explained it to me, so I finally get it. Vanity is a leash if you hold it right, and Trent's vanity practically walked itself into the room. I wore a small recording pin Priya's detective friend had shown me how to use, clipped inside my cardigan's top button. My phone sat face down on the table the night of the party, buzzing once, a text from the detective. We're 2 minutes out if you need us. Otherwise standing by. I sat through the appetizers with that phone warm against my palm under the tablecloth, and I did not touch my wine. The private room at the restaurant held 18 people, Elle's friends, a few cousins, Trent's business associates, the 2 suits I recognized from the champagne toast 3 months earlier. Trent stood to give his fund update, champagne flute in hand, and I could see he'd rehearsed it. Frank here finally wants the details, he said, grinning at the room like it was a punchline. God love him, man built a print shop from a garage and still thinks liquidity is a kind of soap. A ripple of laughter. Elle laughed too, a beat too late, not really understanding the joke, just following the room. So here's the deal, everybody. Meridian Bishop's pre-IPO logistics fund is up 22% on paper. We expect liquidity events by Q3, and honestly, Frank, if you trusted me with the whole nest egg instead of holding some back, you'd be looking at real numbers by now. I set down my fork. Trent, I said, quiet, the way I'd say something to a nervous new hire on the print floor. What's the fund's custodian? He blinked. Frank, we've been over. You don't have to answer that one. I already know there isn't one. I reached into my jacket, not fast, not dramatic, and set Priya's 1-page summary on the white tablecloth, sliding it toward Elle first. There's no fund, sweetheart. There never was. It's 3 shell companies with your husband's name buried 3 layers down, and $1.06 million of your trust sitting in an account he opened by forging your signature. I have the notarized handwriting comparison. I have the wire records. I have him on tape, 3 weeks ago, in your own driveway, saying, and I'm quoting exactly, the old man's harmless, and that by the time I figured it out, he'd be in the Caymans. The table had gone dead silent except for the low murmur of the restaurant beyond the door. Trent's face had gone the color of the tablecloth. This is, Frank, you don't understand structured finance, you're twisting. I understand a forged signature, I said, still not raising my voice. I understand $1.06 million. And I understand that a man doesn't need a wealth management degree to know what an empty office at a co-working space with an $89 a month mailbox looks like. That was when the door opened and Detective Ruiz and his partner stepped in, badges out, calm as Sunday. Trenton Bishop, we need to talk to you about a forged financial instrument and some wire transfers. You're not under arrest yet, but I'd suggest you come with us quietly. Trent's chair scraped back so hard it toppled. One of the 2 suits stood up fast and started backing toward the door. I later learned he was the analyst who'd helped draft the fake fund documents, and he was arrested 9 days later on separate wire fraud charges. I stood, walked to the head of the table where the champagne bottle sat, the same brand from that afternoon in the backyard, the to liquidity toast, and I picked it up by the neck, and I poured every last drop of it out onto the carpet in one slow, deliberate motion. Then I set the empty bottle down, gently, in front of Trent's overturned chair. To liquidity, I said. Nobody laughed this time. Within 6 weeks, the consequences arrived like dominoes falling in exactly the order I'd have chosen, if I'd been cruel enough to choose. Trent Bishop was charged with forgery, wire fraud, and grand theft by embezzlement. Facing a state case with Priya's paper trail and a federal wire fraud referral from the Caymans-bound transfers, he took a plea. 7 years, with restitution ordered at $1.06 million, most of which, thanks to a court-ordered asset freeze before he could move a dollar offshore, was recovered from the Shell LLC accounts within 90 days. The analyst, a man named Curtis Feld, pled to a lesser charge and lost his securities license permanently. The 2 suits from that first backyard champagne toast turned out to be small-time investors Trent had also fleeced for $180,000 combined, pitching them the same fictional fund. They got their money back from the frozen accounts, and they thanked me. Actual strangers, standing in a courthouse hallway, thanking a retired printer for catching the man who'd taken their retirement savings. Elle filed for divorce the week of the arrest. She didn't need convincing. She'd read Priya's one-page summary alone in her car that same afternoon, and by the time the dinner happened, she told me later, she already suspected. She just hadn't had proof, and she hadn't wanted to believe it without proof, which I understood better than anyone alive. The one act of grace I insisted on. Trent had, in the year before his arrest, hired a small back-office staff for Meridian Bishop, 2 young women, an assistant and a junior bookkeeper, both of whom had no idea the fund was fictional and had simply been doing the administrative work they were told to do. Both lost their jobs overnight when the company dissolved under investigation. I paid 3 months of severance to each of them out of my own pocket. No strings, no press release. One of them, a 24-year-old named Bianca, ended up applying for, and getting, an entry-level bookkeeping role at my old print company, now under new ownership, on my personal recommendation. Margaret would have liked that. She always said you punish the wolf, not the sheep standing next to him. 4 months later, on a night with sleet coming down sideways, the kind of Toledo night that gets into your bones, my doorbell rang. Trent was on my porch, out on bail pending sentencing, thinner than I remembered, wearing a coat too thin for the weather, no umbrella, his $400 boutique linen shirts apparently a thing of the past. He looked, for the first time since I'd known him, like a man instead of a performance. "Frank," he said, voice cracking. "I have nowhere else. Elle won't answer. My parents won't either. I just need somewhere to stay a few nights. I'll get back on my feet. I swear it this time. I swear." I stood in the doorway, the same doorway where a courier had once handed me a box with my dead wife's handwriting on it, and I felt the old cane in my hand. Not a prop this time, just a cane, because at 67, in the rain, my knee actually did ache. "You had 18 months and a family that trusted you," I said, quiet, no anger left in it, just fact. "You chose the Caymans instead. I hope you use these 7 years to become someone worth trusting. But that's not going to happen on my porch." I closed the door. Gently. No slam. Margaret always said slamming doors was for people who hadn't finished making their point yet, and I had finished mine a long time ago. Elle was inside, curled up on the couch with a mug of tea, the fire going. She'd moved back in with me temporarily while the divorce finalized, and some nights it felt less like taking care of my grown daughter and more like the two of us taking care of each other. "Was that him?" she asked. "It was." She nodded slowly and didn't ask anything else, and I sat down next to her, and for a while neither of us said much of anything at all, just the fire and the sleet on the windows, and somewhere in the quiet of that house, I swear I could still hear Margaret's voice on that old cassette tape. Trust the numbers, not the smile. She was right about that, the way she was right about most things. I only wished I'd learned it while she was still here to tease me for taking 4 years to catch up. Here's what I know now that I didn't know standing in that rain with an unopened box. The people who count on you not paying attention are usually the ones who deserve it most. Playing weak isn't weakness. It's patience with a purpose. And sometimes the people who love us leave us exactly what we need to protect ourselves, long after they're gone. If someone in your life has ever underestimated you, I want to hear about it in the comments. What gave them away? If this story hit home, hit like, subscribe for more, and I'll see you in the next one.